Bad lawyer jokes are an old genre, but if you're a consumer, finding a client-focused practice is serious. If you're an attorney, understanding today's ethical duty of care is critical. Anchored by current headlines and showcasing major legal minds, Ethical-ish speaks to consumers and attorneys about the modern, transparent law practice. Sponsored by Case Status, powered by LawPods.
Welcome to Ethical-ish. This is a live podcast, so hopefully you're listening to me on the recording as well. We're not streaming it, so the live part is you in the room. So you can see there's a lot of effort involved with that. But Ethical-ish is an idea that we had really over a year ago of trying to pull the curtain open on what makes a modern law firm ethical or not. And it's interesting because we really started to lean into that conversation, thinking about it from a lawyer's point of view of ethics and the American Bar Association and all the state bars. And as I've gone through interviewing and meeting folks in this process, I've learned that it's actually what Angel was talking about a little bit more on Wednesday of consequential ethics, if I'm saying that correctly, which is really just good business. Do we do things because we're going to get disbarred? No, that's not really why we have that fear on certain levels, but ultimately we want to do things that put us in the best light of our businesses, our brand, and make us really strong going concerns. So Ethical-ish, I think, is a really fun lean in on the gray area, and we try to get there. So I've encouraged my panel to push back on me when I bring something up, and I have my point of view because I am sort of your least common denominator. I am just a regular consumer. I'm not a practicing lawyer or somebody that's been in the legal field for very long. So we'll make it a little bit interactive as well, and I will, like I've done before, repeat questions that we get from the audience, but we'll try to do. My North Star is client experience. So anybody that wants to call me out, if I'm getting off of that, that's what's going through my brain. I want to keep it on client experience. We're at the Client Experience Summit. We have a collective goal, the groups in here, of putting that client first, as we talked about yesterday. And ultimately, we want to look at that very closely today. So unscripted, but North Star, and we'll try to stay close to that magic. So before we dive into some of the format, you need to meet these poor souls that I've put on stage. I say that they're just like you. The only difference is you can answer questions, but you can volunteer to answer questions. They have to answer questions. So that's why they have such comfy chairs up here, so that's their payment for participating. But I've tried to create some diversity. Everybody's like, you got 5 guests on a podcast? Nobody does that. Well, and then I know I'm doing something right because I'm breaking a norm. So I will sort of give you some of my typecasting here of why I've got who I've got. But I'd rather we just go through and meet a few folks, and then I can kind of tell you the corner I've painted them into and see if that works. But because I read left to right, maybe, Brian, we'll start with you and go from there.
I'm Brian Page. I'm the Chief Legal Officer with Trust Gus Injury Attorneys. I'm also an attorney. We're primarily headquartered in Houston. I run our New Orleans office. We've also have offices in Atlanta and LA and Chicago. So yeah, practicing attorney still, also on the executive level with the firm.
I'm Constance Anastopoulo. I am a professor at the Charleston School of Law, and I am the president of Charleston School of Law. Prior to joining the faculty about 18 years ago, I practiced for 15 years in South Carolina as a litigator, doing primarily plaintiff's personal injury work. But as a professor, I teach ethics, and I have taught at Charleston School of Law, at UCLA Law School, and that's my primary focus in teaching.
My name is Ty Robinson. I am the owner of Ty Robinson Law Firm. It's local here to Charleston. I see some other local Charleston attorneys in the audience as well. And I'm very thankful to be on this stage with these super talented people, especially Constance, who taught me what liability insurance was and uninsured coverage and underinsured coverage as well. So I thank her for introducing me to the PI space and primarily why I'm here today. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Marina Bradley. I'm the executive director of Ostroff Godshaw, personal injury firm in the Philadelphia area. We have 9 offices in Pennsylvania. We do primarily MVA premises cases, also MedMal. Rich Godshaw took over the firm about 3 years ago, and I've been running it with him since then. Before then, I did work in insurance defense, and I think Rich and I both worked in insurance defense before, and we sort of have that outlook of knowing what the other side is like, and we bring that to plaintiff's work.
And my name is Angel Evan. I'm an AI ethicist and the AI practice lead for AG Consulting in Seattle. I come from a data science background over the last 10 years, now almost exclusively focused on ethics and the ethical implementation of technology. I spend most of my time helping companies like Uber and Microsoft figure out actually how to do that, what needs to be in place in order to pull that off.
Awesome. I love having you here. And if you want to get into my brain of how I'm wired on these folks, and again, I hope they break my stereotype here, but I've got the larger scaling law firm with Trust Gus. I've got my academic with Constance, right? I've got my growing firm here in Charleston with Ty. I've got my non-legal C-suite executive director with Marina. And I have my outside industry and AI expertise with Angel. So they'll push back a little bit on me, which is appropriate because, again, they're way more than just that. But for me, that's what I'm trying to bring, some different points of view. So I do have an icebreaker question to kick us off. And again, North Star client experience. So I'm going to start putting the question out there, and I'll answer the question first to give you guys a little bit of thoughtfulness there. But they've been warned what the question is. So my question is basically, what's happened in your life, in your own personal experience that was a good client experience, good consumer experience? Quick note, I observe us talking about us and them in a lot of these discussions. And to me, it's really we, right? We only have to put on a consumer hat real quick to be in the shoes of our client consumers. Andrew Finkelstein, who couldn't be here because he's in trial or he had a meeting related to trial that popped up, we got to do a little bit of pre-CX Summit interview with him. And during COVID, he wrote a book. And I love the title of the book, which is I Hope We Never Meet. And so I think that is all the status that I put myself in is I hope we never meet. Short of maybe an immigration attorney that gets me a visa to go work abroad, or, an intellectual property attorney who takes my patent, to some awesome level. For the most part, I love what you guys do, but, we really think about that side of it. So again, we are the client in many ways. Our staff is the client, the potential client in many ways. So empathy is actually very clear. So, all right. So the question that I'll answer is, I actually got to go to Vail recently for Oktoberfest, really cool opportunity. And I stayed in an old hotel, only 36 rooms, right outside of a little area. Well, that's where they have the Oktoberfest stand. And if you've ever been to an Oktoberfest celebration, the polka music is where it's at. And the keg bowling and the, Stein holding contest. But that was right outside our window, and it was a great spot. But the owners really were involved in that experience. And I like to ride bikes, and I was scouting out what goes on, in the Rocky Mountains. And there's this great bike path that goes up the Vail Pass. And I went to them and asked them, could you help me find a bike? And not only did they find a bike, the owner let me use his bike. So he basically said, well, what size are you? And he hooked me up with this awesome road bike, gave me all the insider knowledge, and I was able to do the Vail Pass. So you want to talk about my client experiences? I'm standing in front of people, which I think most of you travel and like to get out and spend the money that you hard earned. So go to Vail, go to the Sitzmark Hotel and check them out. They're amazing owner-led, experience-led organization. And so, that's my experience I want to share. Do I have a volunteer who wants to share a personal experience first?
I'll share. I honestly thought your question was client in a legal setting. So all I have prepared is a client in a legal setting. If I knew it could be consumer, this would have been a lot easier. In a legal setting, I actually was a partial owner in a Tennessean Common in the city of San Francisco, which is kind of like group ownership. We had a situation where I was coming into that organization, someone else was leaving that group, and it created some legal disputes over, who owed what, at what time. The great client experience I had, though, is I was kind of a babe in the woods in terms of, legal process. But what made it great, the attorney that I worked with to kind of get through it, and we worked through arbitration successfully, what made it great was the organization. I think that's really what I was looking for. Just somebody who had a methodology, who was buttoned up, who knew exactly what was needed at each step, and that really kind of built trust. And overall, that's kind of what won out for me.
I don't think you could hit the mark any better than that with this audience. So well done. Well done. Marina, you want to take us next?
So mine is not legal related, but I had a scary experience at my house. My carbon monoxide detectors went off. And so there was carbon monoxide leaking in my basement. Didn't know what was going on. I called a local HVAC company, and they came out right away. They, on the phone, were like, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. We're going to take care of this. We'll be there. They texted me when they were 15 minutes out, came out. The guy stayed until there were safe levels detected. And afterwards, they made sure I was happy, asked for a review. And I was like, man, I almost wanted to hire the person on the phone that took my call that day to work at the law firm, because I was like, they made me feel reassured and safe and communicated with me. And it just reinforced how clients should be treated.
Awesome. Love it. Ty, you want to go next?
Sure. Whenever I think of great client experiences or experiences in general, I think about vacations, nice dinners, honeymoons. But I've got young children, both under the age of 3. So I think of kids' birthday parties. So what was a great experience for us was when my son turned 3, we went to a bounce house or a sky zone type area, and you walk in and they've got the balloons everywhere. They've got the signs for your children. They know his name. They know our name. They've got a person specifically set for your group. They let you double bounce your kid, even though it's against the rules. So just having that really personalized experience was great for us and our family. And, just that our, chapter in our life that really stood out to us.
I'll go next. I thought about this in a little bit different context. So the experience that came to my mind had to do with, I fly a lot. I know a lot of you do, being on airplanes all the time. And I was on an airplane recently after I had lost somebody very, very close to me. And I got on the plane and I was just overcome, and there, people were getting on and the plane was getting ready to leave. And I was just overcome with emotion, and I couldn't help it, but tears started to roll down my cheeks. And this flight attendant noticed, and she came over with a very kind face and handed me some tissues and just said, here. She wasn't trying to fix it or find out what was wrong. That was 7 years ago, and I can still remember that experience. And I remember that experience because she saw me. She felt kindness, and she did one teeny tiny thing, hand me tissues, but it had such an impact on me. And these flight attendants see hundreds of people get on and off planes. They don't necessarily get treated well, but that she extended that kindness to me in that moment, it really impacted me. And I think for lawyers, sometimes it's not about getting the great judgment or getting your client money. It's about seeing them, hearing them, and know that they are seen and heard. So.
Awesome story. Brian, bring us home.
Yeah, so I recently had the good fortune of being able to take a trip with my wife for the first time in more than 13 years, because my eldest is 13. And so we went to Cambodia and Vietnam. And, as attorneys, we're always trying to be in control of things, want to plan everything, we're doing it this way. But we decided to use like a travel company for the first time. And it was amazing, with just being able to just basically let go. We told them kind of what we wanted to do. We had people handling us from morning through evening. They were always there early. They were always, on call for anything that we needed. It was really nice to just actually be taken care of for once, as opposed to taken care of as a parent. And so it was a very unique experience that I hadn't had in a long time. And it was amazing.
So I appreciate everybody going heartfelt, especially, right? Like, those are moving. If you think about where my mind was a month ago on this podcast, I wanted to put a client up here. I wanted to put one of Ty's clients up here, and he's been feverishly recruiting, and it's a hard process. I found that it's a very challenging process in the legal field, but many of you use these same stories in your practice on your website and with testimonials. So again, part of my goal is to create that empathy. I think a lot of you have that, but think about that consumer, that client hat that we all wear. And again, when we come up to that individual, or we have our staff do it, it's really easy connection to make. So I've put together a little video that is about 4 minutes long, but I want to show this, and we'll take some questions from that and build on it.
I was on my way home from work. I was actually at a stoplight.
My son was in 3rd grade, and he was having behavioral issues.
I had to go on dialysis. Tried on multiple occasions to work full-time. Just never worked out.
My daughter and I are off to lunch.
There was a machine in front of the buck hoist that somebody asked me to move. I was walking with it, and my foot hit something on the trash or the pipe, and it just ran on my foot and stayed there.
Behind me, they hit me, and they hit another gentleman next to me, and they just drove off.
All of a sudden, this car comes out of nowhere and just runs a stop sign, and next thing I know, My daughter and I are in an ambulance heading over to the hospital.
He was frustrated and he was overwhelmed, and that's why he was acting out. I went and had him tested, and I wasn't going to be able to afford the boot camp that they had.
They wanted paperwork proving that I was disabled, filled it all out, gave them the proper doctors that they needed to contact. Late June, I received a denial.
And as soon as something traumatic like this happens, everything's on hold. You no longer can be that strong mom that says, you know, hey, I can do it all, right? This comes to a point where you're instantly at a halt and you need help and you can't do all the things that you could before.
I can't go back to work. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage, my bills. It was the most emotional thing I went through.
One of my friends gave me Jeff's name. I felt like he was emotionally invested. I feel like he kind of knew where I was coming from. He understood how emotionally distraught I was about my situation.
First thing I did was call Stuart J. Gus. Spoke to their intake. They were extremely nice. They were extremely helpful in the situation.
When I did get a hold of Sam and I found out that there is a way to be compensated for your injuries, that was just such a bigger relief.
I felt like I mattered to them. I wasn't just another client. They actually cared for me. They called me not just to ask about the case, but asked about how I was doing and if I'm doing better and if I'm...
Helped me out with everything. We went in, everything went as smoothly as she told me it was going to go.
He got all of the school records and implemented everything that Gavin needed.
When Mr. Gottschall stood up for the first time and talked to the jury about my case, I felt comfortable. I felt we was gonna win, and I was confident in it.
Worked the following Monday that said everything was perfect. No problem, received my disability. The stress factor throughout the entire process was so little because of the firm that I don't know how to say thank you enough. They were amazing.
It's unbelievable, the difference. All of the extra help that he's getting, he needed it. I was happy for him to help me advocate for my son. I can honestly say that I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. He's worth every penny.
When I felt somebody had my back and I knew that what I did wasn't wrong and that I was hurt, makes me feel like it's all worth it.
I would highly recommend the Richard Harris Law Firm if you've been in an accident or you need a good attorney. They're going to be there for you every step of the way. They're going to guide you through the process. And in the end, they're just going to do the right thing for you.
I know I could trust Gus.
All right, that's the best thing I could do to get a client on the hot seat. But again, a lot of the attendees here, the brands that are here represented in that video montage. And again, sorry for the amateur cut. That was my handiwork. So all that said, anything stand out to you on that video, on that story, on that journey? I know there's things that catch my eye. Anybody want to venture an answer?
For me, that's the ultimate goal, right? You want a client that's going to be extraordinarily happy with their journey. And what you don't see in this video is that this journey started a long time ago. So all the great things you hear these clients talk about is how much they trust, how much they enjoyed their time with this law firm. But what I think about the most is the beginning of this journey. They probably are calling you with the scariest part of their life just happened. They got into a significant incident and they're trying to figure out who to call, who to talk to. They've heard about lawyers before. So from the law firm standpoint, you're already behind the eight ball because they're like, I got to call these attorneys. I don't trust them. So the end result of these videos is this entire team for these firms just did an amazing job of building that trust from the intake, reinforcing that trust throughout every step of the case. And that was incredible to hear the end result of it, knowing how much took to get to that point.
Love it. What else? Anything else?
Yeah, and I think to add to that, it's interesting when you watch them retell their stories, you can see at the beginning, like the uncertainty, like the trauma is still there from that. And then as they go through their stories towards the end, you see, their eyes lighten up, their facial expressions change. So, it's really showing that it's real for them still. Like they went through this, that was a very difficult thing. And even though, they're at a happy enough outcome that they're giving a testimonial about the attorneys that they used, it's still something that's very visceral for them.
I think, and Rich's client in this video in particular said, that she thought Rich was going to win. And that's like building that trust with Rich is really important. He wants the client to feel comfortable that if he gets a $5 million offer and he says, don't take it, they trust him and they say, okay, I'm not going to take it. Building that trust is the entire length of the case. And it is about the communication with the client.
So I think we're at a crossroads here. And I think Case Status, since our inception, has been at this crossroads of human to human relationships. That's the hardest part of scale of, I think, what all of you do. The legal work, notwithstanding, is challenging enough. But to be able to maintain that one-on-one connection while we build in technology and let technology handle some more and more of it. The good news is the consumer, I think, is evolving and is very amenable to some of the technology that we're talking about. But Marina, I might put you on the spot. I like the story that we talked about with regards to this idea of technology. And this CX Summit we're trying to anchor in AI, right? Artificial intelligence, now client intelligence, becoming that system of action. I know there's a lot of folks in the exhibitor hall that are trying to do a lot of the same things. And so automation is the predecessor of a lot of this AI agentic ideas. So Marina, I think you have an interesting anecdote. Obviously, we have a philosophy here at Case Status about the idea of nice to have versus need to have. And I think you've experienced that firsthand. I think about 2 yellow sticky notes stand out in your story, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
To start with the yellow sticky notes for context, Rich, I think that the importance of client communication starts from the top down at our firm. And Rich writes 2 phone numbers on a Post-it note every afternoon when he leaves the office, and he calls 2 clients on his drive home. And that's just like the way he's always done it. And he just every single day. And so that's a little bit of an old school way to do it. Case Status gives us a more modern way to communicate with the clients. But Rich was resistant to it a little bit because the word automation to him was sort of a bad word. The word automation meant taking away that person-to-person meaningful connection. But in reality, what we had to reframe Case Status as, and the automations, where they were automating the things that were taking up my team's time and allowing them to focus on those meaningful communications with their clients. So take away getting provider names and addresses and spend time with, how's your knee feeling? How are your headaches today? That was what automation helped us with. It actually made us better, not robots replacing us.
Not all touch points are created equal, and the quality versus quantity certainly makes a difference. And so, I think to me, that's where I see a lot of what we're trying to solve for. The questions in the room, the discussions are, where do we deploy this? How do we deploy it? We want to maintain that connection, that one-on-one, and have access. I guess, Angel, I'll put you on the spot just as outside industry, having experience outside of legal tech. Do you see anything in your world where technology is maybe making that human engagement, facilitating some of it? I know I sort of posed the question to you about driver and rider in the Uber world. I like to think that there's some human-to-human connection when you break it all down.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing examples, but I think there's a couple things to clarify, and one is terms. And having studied under a few former barristers, I've learned define your terms early and clearly. So on the topic of automation, I think it's important to understand the difference between automation and agentic, because you hear this term kind of floated around a lot lately in AI. So automation typically means rule-based systems. They're deterministic. So if this happens, then we do this. That's automation. Agentic gives you, it's kind of the next level where it says, we will give this bot some level of autonomy, some decision-making power. And so an example of that that I've absolutely seen is in research, where we say, go out, bot, and find the most meaningful research that pertains to this particular case. And so that I think is very real. But I think here's maybe the bigger thing that I would bring up, and it's not the differentiation between automation and agentic. It is clearly defining the role for the technology. So if you are looking at technology to replace versus augment people, that's very different. So augmentation to me has a lot of value. Augmentation allows me to scale. And so I think, as an example, if we have routine emails that we're, fielding, and the same response goes out, like word for word, I don't see a lot of need for sort of, personalization in that per se. That's something that can be automated. And I don't think that necessarily even detracts from the human experience, but just being very clear about the role of the technology before rushing to implement it.
I'm going to go loose on the terms, though, Angel. So keep me straight here. But I appreciate that sort of rule-based automation. You can still have agentic operation with oversight, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's another thing to think about as you, not just are you augmenting or replacing, but thinking about, do you still have controls? Do you still have the oversight needed for that particular operation? And again, I want to hit on the human to human. So if my North Star is client experience, do you see anything with, maybe, again, back to my Uber driver and rider, do you feel like it's bringing them closer together, 2 5 stars? Is it on that level of relationship or no?
I think it can help facilitate the relationship in the sense of maybe expectations, which is where I like it a lot. So as, for Uber, for example, or Lyft or any of the other rideshare platforms, you have certain expectations as a consumer. And I think automation of those things, like automatically populating preferences in the car, helps to facilitate a better relationship and then ultimately results in, a better score for the driver. I think that's maybe the other thing that I would point out with automation is typically when you're automating something, there's an expectation of what the result should be. So just be very clear on what that expectation is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of thought put in the room on journeys in our respective practice areas as to what that end result should be. Certainly, when we're on the smaller scale, we understand that. The question is, how do we scale that up to the larger firm? Brian, I'll sort of ask that question to you of just automations versus what's happening on the agentic side. Do you guys get that philosophical when it comes to identifying tasks as augmentation, or is it more experimentation bit by bit? Because I feel like that's a little bit of where we are in some of the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, like you say. And unfortunately, a lot of times the choices that you make or the decisions that you make are based upon reacting to maybe a negative situation, right? So you can set up, the journey or the automatic messages coming out of case status that you think might be appropriate for maybe 90% of your clients, but it's always that 10% or it's the 80-20 principle, right? Where the particular client themselves may need something more, expect something more, and the automated messages that they're getting are not satisfactory to them. So I think it's always kind of a balance about how you approach that.
You were talking about in your panel yesterday on the data, a little bit about your most surprising thing was when people check out the app. Was that one? I think that was your comment, correct?
Yeah. With case status, it's great because you can see when, the clients are logging into it. And I was just floored by seeing the amount of clients that are logging into the app at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. It just goes to show like kind of what they're going through. It humanizes the process that we often say, okay, wreck happened. Let's get him the treatment. Let's try to put him back together. Let's get him a settlement or take it, into litigation. But, something woke that person up or that client up in the middle of the night and they checked their case. So it's clear that this is a very big part of their life. And I think that's important to kind of keep front of mind as we go through the daily grind.
All right. So I'm going to push into the future of subjective what might be, right? Let's take that example. I love this example. This is part research on my side, right? So 3 a.m., they check out. To me, there's anxiety there. I know when I wake up at 3 a.m. preparing for a podcast, there's a lot of anxiety, what I'm going to be prepared to do. It would have been really nice to get an email in my inbox that said, you got nothing to worry about. So my question on the AI side, I think about a great trigger, a great use case. You see a login at 3 a.m. How cool would it be to have Brian send that person a message that showed up right about 8:30 and just say, hey, we're just checking in on you. Wanted to let you know things are looking good from this side, right? You get a message. Maybe it suggested it and you said, yeah, send it. Or maybe it sent it on its own. Constance, are we heading into a slippery slope there, do you think, when it comes to these types of communications? Or maybe it helps to address 1.4 and sort of the obligation there if we're not talking about specific legal matters, just caring.
Yeah, I think, in terms of the ethical side, the duty of communication and lawyers don't really get disbarred for not communicating, but they do get slapped on the wrist. They get suspended for failure to communicate. And if AI can help that communication, even if it's an automated email that says, just an update you on the case. I don't think that's slippery slope. I think clients, as Brian said, I think you said, they just want to be heard and they want to be seen. And if they get that automated email at 8:30 in the morning, you're really fulfilling your duty to communicate with your client. It's when I think the automated piece takes over and the lawyer gets separated from actually making the decisions. I told that story yesterday. I had a case when I practiced, which was many years ago. I had a case that involved some clients of mine that I had known for a long time. And what happened in the case was a situation that the case law was against me. The rules were against me. But what happened in the case, I just kept thinking to myself, they can't do that. They cannot do what they did to my client, the insurance company being they. They can't do that. And if I had just automated it and sent it through AI, it would have been, do not take this case. Don't waste your time. It's a loser. I ended up taking it to the Supreme Court of South Carolina and winning and changing the law because my moral mind kept saying, they can't do that. And so you can't turn the reins over, and that's where it gets slippery slope.
Yesterday's session, if you missed it, again, all of our recordings are going to be made available and CLE as well. Constance did a lightning round session getting into, cloud security and different things. By the way, this is going to be CLE eligible. I can't wait to see ethical-ish on your CLE record, right? I just can imagine when that comes across. I have to point that out. But you just got into metadata. I thought it was very interesting, the conversation about just what's behind, not just the AI models, but what's behind, documents and when stuff was created, or maybe some notes and subtext and whatnot. And I think I felt like it created a buzz a little bit in the audience. But thinking about how you teach ethics in your tenure, I bet that's changed a lot. I bet the year one law school students are learning things a little bit differently. I don't know if they read anymore or how the research is taking place. But what comments would you make about how things are changing on the next wave of attorneys that are coming through their schooling?
Well, yeah, it is changing. One of the biggest changes for me is they don't have books anymore. It's all electronic, and they just read them on their iPad and highlight it on their iPad. They don't carry those heavy books around anymore. One of the things that we talked about yesterday, and I think, at the law school at least, we are sort of refocusing our teaching on actually going back to more Socratic method. Because with the automation, with the AI, we have to teach our students and future lawyers how to think and how to analyze and how to evaluate cases. The concern is these hallucination cases. And that's, if it's real or not real, that's kind of easy. But sometimes what happens with AI is it conflates the majority opinion with a concurrence. And if a student doesn't understand the difference between those and they just get the case from AI, that's a problem. So we are actually kind of changing back to sort of basics in terms of Socratic method to get students to start thinking more and doing critical analysis in the classroom.
Ty, again, bringing it back this way a little bit. I know you have been an attorney for a while, but you've got a good, growing, thriving local firm and continue to expand. Do you see AI as a tool that you, because of your size and how you're scaling up, you're able to put it to work? And is it helping you in that human-to-human relationship that is so important to your practice?
Yeah, sure. I think it's doing a great job for us. The biggest thing about being a PI attorney is there's a lot of them. In a small community like Charleston, the Tri-County area, there's a lot of competitors. I see a lot of them out here in the audience today as well that are big dogs. That's who I'm trying to compete with, get a slice of the market pie with. So with the AI, I'm able to address scaling in a more efficient manner without having to ramp up, other people, without having to ramp up overhead, and be able to compete with these folks because they've got established firms that have been around for a very long time. And they're trying to do the same thing at a little much larger scale. So I think AI has really given us the tools to compete in that regard. And then when it comes to clients, it's helped tremendously. Being a small firm, the biggest competition point I have against these bigger law firms is you call me, you get Ty. When you're trying to scale, maybe Ty's not always there. And I think with AI, with the automated messages, like Brian was talking about, that case status has, it helps us address a lot of client communications in a more efficient manner as well. And I think that journey and with these clients, it's important to explain to them why it's not always me, and addressing that from the immediate set off of the case, which is intake. And each time we communicate with them, explaining to them, hey, Ty is your guy for sure, but we have a great team of people behind us as well that know the questions you're answering. By all means, call. I will call you back, email you, message you. But AI really allows us to address any kind of client concerns in a really efficient manner, even if it's not me directly.
Yeah, I think I've seen several use cases where the low, we can see entry level staff ramp up pretty quickly with the assistants and be on brand and help that out and also free up your time to have those more meaningful conversations. All right, so I've kind of put them on the hot seat from some of my perspectives. I've assembled these folks up here, and again, I don't want to cut anybody off on where the conversation is going, but I do want to give anybody in the audience that might have a question for any one of our panelists or all of them, if you've got something that you want to throw this way, we'd be happy to take it from the field, including case status folks. Yeah, so the question for our on-demand listeners out there is, in implementing a client experience, a portal, did we have any reservations with regards to giving more access, giving more transparency? A question was similarly asked. It compared it to healthcare yesterday, because healthcare portals sometimes cause the physicians more headache, and there was a good answer to that. But any thoughts on the trepidation of giving more transparency and giving more information and more access to you?
To be honest, I first thought when I heard, from our team that we were going to be implementing, the case status portal, I was like, do people really want another app? I thought to my own phone about how I don't know where anything is anymore on my phone. I just use the search function to find it because there's just pages and pages of app. And then you see the data comes back and it's 87% adoption from the client. So that caused pause for me to say, okay, wait a minute, maybe you're misreading this, this need and this want from the clients. But then, the access that they have to it, it's not like your internal thoughts or communications, right? It's kind of curated to what, you want the client to have. And so I think it's very helpful, again, with these, late night check-ins and things like that. They're always able to see where they're at on their journey. The way that the app is set up through the process, they're able to see, okay, I'm halfway there. Okay, I'm 3/4 of the way there. So I think it really helps them kind of put everything into perspective, and the access is just there on their terms, right? So they want to send a quick message. We get it. We get back to them when we can. But for them, they did their part to reach out. And I think it's also far less intimidating sometimes for especially younger clients to just send a quick text, as opposed to I'm going to call my lawyer and I'm going to talk to my lawyer, right? So yeah, I originally, I was a little like, they really want another app, but now it's 100% that it's the right way to do it. Yeah, it's what clients want.
Which is interesting, because when we look at it from a data science standpoint, apps are how we engage with our brands. And I've done unofficial just research, but you look at other lower utility. I mean, look at what's on your phone right now. For me, my most used apps are Starbucks, right? You're talking about utility of what? $8. It's convenient to get a coffee, but it's worthy of that real estate. USAA, my banking app, my insurance app, that's there, and I use it occasionally. But the thing that struck me about the videos is there's nothing more important going on in their life, right? They absolutely, the idea of downloading it, and the beauty of it is it's not text and email, it's direct channel case management system to app and back, right? So I think that part of the experience, it's funny. I think it's a great leap of faith into our world, but you look at every other industry. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, Angel, for Uber, but Uber doesn't say, do you want to email your driver? I mean, it just starts giving you information. You can look, you can see where it is, how far out is he or she, what kind of car, like all the information is there. I don't want to talk to them until I sit down, and then maybe I still don't want to talk to them, and hopefully they matched me with the right person. But anyway, I think it's a great, yeah, go ahead, Constance.
I just want to add, I think it's a really good question. And from the ethics side of it, one of the things that I talked about yesterday was, who are you doing business with? One of the things that Paul and I have talked about is that their portal is encrypted from end to end. What is the safety measures in place? Because you can't go with the low budget, you have a portal, here's your app, and that can get hacked and that can get, so it's really important. And I think case status, as we've talked about, the end-to-end encryption and the safeties that are built in, because you have to know who you're doing business with when you're putting client stuff out there.
Andy, I think, said it's the Domino's tracker. And that to me, when I was, how many times do I open my Amazon app to see how many stops away my driver is? Like, I don't know why, but I just do it. I'm compelled to do it. So like that mentality, lends itself to having case status be a very useful tool.
No, I love that. I have to push back real quick on that's where we've come from. I love it. It's a great analogy, but I will ask you, we can do a Bill Biggs exercise. Close your eyes and imagine your favorite pizza back home. And imagine, I guarantee it's not Domino's. I guarantee you don't know the person at Domino's who's making your pizza. You have no relationship. It is a cool way to get pizza and get it delivered when you need it, but the pizza I go to get to, it's family run, it's great pizza. It's trying to emulate what's in New York, and it's the closest thing we can get in Charlotte. So, and I know the family that runs it. And that to me is a metaphor of what we're trying to do and move away from just tracking, right? And go to scale, but maintain a human-to-human relationship. So I like that you brought that one back up. So I'm spinning it a little bit in the gray area. Yes, an awesome question. I wish he was mic'd up because he used the term safe-ish for those out there. It was a really good play. Yes, I think the summary, not all practice areas necessarily want that information, that tracking somebody else. The confidentiality is where we're entering in. And it really does tie back to the idea of, is your phone with two-factor authentication private to begin with, right? We're kind of building on that premise, but other practice areas maybe are not as aligned with others that are using it more prevalently. I don't know if there's any response to those considerations from the folks up there, but we'll try to get some of that answered for you. Implications of AI chatbots and unsupervised chatbots and AI voice. What are the implications there? I think on your session, we kind of got into that a little bit. Of is it closed? Is it private? Is it secure if a model is working with it? I don't know where the stance on that, but any thoughts on where folks are going in that highly changing area? Yeah, it's coming pretty fast. Is anybody using it?
Most of my clients are in the chatbot space. To be honest, it's a challenge. When we get into chatbots, the thing to understand is that is an entire application. Happening. So it's a whole chain of technologies that actually need to be working together, which is daunting unto itself. The one thing I'll tell you, though, is that all of those chatbots are typically trained on a corpus of data. So there's some knowledge base that we're feeding it, and we make decisions on how creative those chatbots can be after digesting that information too. So the thing that's important to understand about that is that there are almost always edge cases when those things do not behave the way they're instructed. And they're almost unforeseeable because you don't know what they're going to say exactly. And I think what I have found is in terms of, what are the implications of that? What I have found is that you really can't plan for the unknown unknowns. I think that the next best thing is to have a system in place for dealing with it. So when something does come up, when a chatbot does kind of come off the rails, you've got a system in place where you can say, let's understand kind of where this happened, how many customers were affected by this, because the scale of the problem is certainly an issue for a lot of people. And then how do we rectify it? Do we need to go in and start addressing the system prompts that we programmed it with that basically, provide the logic for how this thing answers? And the other thing that I would heavily promote, and this is maybe a little bit newer, is I'm seeing more companies put guardrails around their chatbots as well. So they've got safety guardrails, they've got communication policy guardrails, they've got ethical guardrails. And those guardrails are in place simply to prohibit chatbots answering something they should not. Right. So again, I think it very much comes down to what kind of scope are we defining for those chatbots and what kind of systems do we put in place around it, especially for the unknowns.
It's almost like cutoff rules. So back to your automation being rule-based, the AI governors are sort of, you got to put the rules in that ring fence around it on where to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And it gets even more complicated when you're doing that outside of the U.S. So, it's hard enough in the U.S. because, the U.S. does not have a single unifying law for AI technology. We have this sort of patchwork of state laws that we're all kind of dealing with, which makes it trickier. But then you move into South America, for example, right? And you've got to uphold those laws, which are very different. They have different terminology. The languages have to be translated to work for the chatbots, right? Because one of the things we look at is, fine, maybe our chatbot works, fine in English. Do we have a duty to make sure that it works as well in Spanish, for example? So again, that's kind of where the scale question comes in. But having systems in place to make sure those things do what they should, and you can deal with them when they can't, I think is kind of the approach I see most taking.
Yeah. Is it unethical to use these at this point?
I think it's, again, the rules aren't changing fast enough to keep up with some of this. You do have that competency rule, right? You have the confidentiality rule. And I think it goes back to some of what I talked about yesterday again, and what I mentioned earlier is who are you doing business with? Who is putting that? What are their rules? Because your duty of confidentiality extends to every third party you do business with. It interacts with your clients, it interacts with your client data. All of your rules that apply to you apply to everybody that you do business with. And so that's why it's so important to have good people that you're doing business with that understand the rules that you operate under. And I think that's one of the big pieces. The chat box thing, as you're talking, Angel, I'm thinking about the guardrails and, can it answer a legal question? No, right? You have to have those guardrails in place, and you have to ensure that you are fulfilling, or it is fulfilling your ethical obligation.
I would liken that to the way that we deal with our legal assistants or paralegals, right? Like they can offer loose advice generally about kind of what's going on with the case, but once it gets to that point where it's turning into legal advice, that's the guardrail, right? That's what we tell our employees to do. Okay, escalate that, right? Get it to the attorney, let the attorney answer that question. So it's interesting when you're saying with the guardrail situation, because we kind of already do that. But how are we going to put that into a chatbot when you're saying that sometimes they just go off the rails?
Couldn't agree more. And I think maybe the macro point that I would make is the technology sometimes is so available, we misperceive it as being a simple solution. It is in fact very complicated and needs to be very thoughtful in its implication. I think that's kind of the big takeaway.
Yeah, for me, the takeaway is supervision. We got to treat it like an employee. It's doing work. Arguably, I'll go on the record as somebody that has nothing on the line, but it's worth saying that it's unethical if it's unsupervised. If you don't have, because I don't think we're in there programming guardrails. Raise a hand who's in there programming guardrails for AI. Yeah. All right. I saw one hand. So it's a very few and far between skill set. But yes, I'd say that's a very good takeaway for me in the audience is that should be when you're talking about something that you're going to do in addition to augmentation or replacement of work or doing work automated. You talk about that supervisory, go deep on it, and if you don't get a solid question, go deeper, because I think that to me is where the discussion is. Maybe in 6 months that changes, but right now I think it's a good rule. What else we got? Challenging client experience that caused the most personal growth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But that's where, right, pain and produces tenacity, right, and growth, and I love it. Good question.
Okay, I'll go back to my practice days. Wow. When I was practicing, I had a client who was 19 years old, came to see me. She had been pregnant, had an uneventful pregnancy, went into labor, not in Charleston, in another part of South Carolina, went to the hospital to deliver. All the OBGYNs from her practice were out of town. So they sent the family practice guy, and the family practice guy just didn't deliver the baby. And he was down in the lounge drinking coffee, and the nurses were like, you have to deliver the baby. It's going into decel, which is deceleration and not getting oxygen to the brain. Eventually, they called another OBGYN from another county. He had to drive in. By the time they delivered the baby was fundamentally, actually the APGARs were 0-0. The baby was dead. They revived the baby, and the baby was fundamentally handicapped in every which way. And this 19-year-old girl walks into my office with a baby that looks normal, a brand new baby. I take the case. I work on the case for 3 years. In the middle of that, I get pregnant with my second child. And the only day I did not work on that case was the day I delivered my child, which was on a Sunday. Monday morning, I was working on that case. And so we go to mediation Friday afternoon. We mediate the thing all day long. We get to a place where they get the number that I think is the right number. And I tell my client, I think this is the right number. And she says, I have to go home and tell my mom, and I'll call you Monday morning. And so she leaves. She, again, lives in another county. Monday morning, I call her. Nobody answers. Call her a little later, and this man answers the phone, and he says, you will be talking to me now. And I said, who are you? And he said, I am the Reverend, and I'm in charge. And I never talked to my client again. A week later, I get a letter from another lawyer who says, I'm now the lawyer for your client. send me the file. Well, the file was 10 banker boxes long. Eventually they came and picked up the boxes. I filed a motion to protect my fee, right? And I wrote a letter. It's called the New Year's Eve letter, CYA letter. I wrote it on New Year's Eve, and it said, you are now responsible for all the costs. You're responsible for the experts. You're responsible for this, setting up the trust for the child, this. The case settled. I got my fee. The lawyer ended up taking all the money. He eventually committed suicide. It was a crazy story. All of that happened. I still have never talked to the client, but it impacted me in a way as a lawyer in so many ways about client communication, understanding that this young woman was 19 years old. I didn't really get that she was so vulnerable to influence. And I learned, and I practiced differently after that. I was a young lawyer at the time. I'm old now, but it fundamentally impacted the kind of lawyer that I became. And it's still, even as I teach now, I think about those young, 21, 22-year-old students in my class and just how naive in some ways they are, but it absolutely impacted me. Sorry.
No, that was, you've had two very deep, stories, Constance.
I'm really not that deep, okay?
On our way out, everybody give her a hug because I think she's earned it. No, I'm trying to think how today's day and age, I don't think we could have helped you with more insight, more connection. Obviously, the subject to influence, a tough situation, right? Technology, I don't think solves for that one. I think of stories of Ken from Pilma. He's told some stories about firing clients. I think that's an interesting one. He holds his staff to a high regard. And if one of his clients cusses out the staff, he'll have a call. He'll say, you have two choices. You can apologize to my staff or you can take your file. And he says 50-50, they take the file and leave. Yeah, there's all sorts of war stories for sure. I think where that intersection is, it's human. It really is. What you all battle every day. I was sincere in sort of that healing, justice, back to normal. There is a fight for the everyday person out there. And again, I'll end it on a note where I hope I never have to hire any of you. But any other questions we've got? So the summary is back to guardrails. And if we can implement that supervision and that guardrail, where would that comfort level, how would it have to be manifested and sort of rendered to make us feel comfortable with it? Do we know where that line is? Obviously, you're seeing it in where people are finding some comfort level with it, but they're deep in the data, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I can maybe start to answer the question, but it needs some domain expertise to maybe finish the the response. I think one thing that's important to understand about technology, in fact, anything new, is that it always ushers in some level of risk. That is a feature of new technology. So you just kind of have to wrap your head around that. To begin with. I think one of the things I've dealt with as an ethicist is it's about finding the thresholds of comfortability. It's never going to be completely deterministic. You're never going to get to this place where it's zero risk. There's always going to be a threshold in there that's some risk and some progress or productivity. And I can't define that for you. I can help lead you to that answer, but I can't tell you what that magic threshold is. That's a decision that I think we all make individually. And certainly within corporate settings.
To piggyback on that, we all practice law slightly differently, right? Like we're all willing to do this or not do that. And you hear other attorneys that they did what? I would never do that sort of thing. So I think it's just going to be very individual choice, right? I don't think there is a hard and fast rule until, the Bar Association comes for you, I guess. So I think everybody's going to make their own individual choices with that.
Yeah, if I can just tag onto that, I think, we talked about metadata yesterday. Can you look at metadata when you get discovery from opposing counsel? And it really is about lawyer philosophy, and what is your philosophy of lawyering in terms of whether there's no rule. The bar hasn't caught up with that yet. There's no rule that says yes or no. And so it's really about lawyer philosophy.
Yeah, one more question. So the question is obligation to disclose the use of AI, the use of different types of AI, large language models, agentic, et cetera. Do we have a duty to disclose that above and beyond, I'm using a cloud system, I'm using, a fax machine?
Yeah, I mean, we've added it to our engagement letters in our contracts that there will be times where we're using, artificial intelligence to aid in, moving their case along. So we do disclose that. Now, we don't use voice or anything like that yet, but I would imagine that if we do get into that, we'll probably put it in our contracts.
I was talking to Chris Keller yesterday about the voice AI, and they do let them know, like, you're speaking to an AI agent right now. If you'd like to speak to a person, do X. So it seemed like a best practice, at least, if not necessary.
I would agree. I think in any industry, you don't want to pretend, you don't want to mask it as a real human, even though it may sound. I think that is clearly a best practice, whether or not it's an obligation. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. I think for me, it kind of what you're touching on really comes down to a core kind of AI ethical principle, which is transparency, which is kind of an easy one to wrap your head around. But I think that the risk of not doing that correctly is there could be perceived deceit, which has real implications to it, as we know. And that's, kind of one of the big thrusts of the FTC, for example, right? They go after, deceitful practices. So I think just keeping, things like transparency and explainability front and center is a general best practice.
All right. Well, you've listened to another wonderful episode of Ethical-ish, the podcast. I appreciate you all joining. I appreciate my panelists being great sports in the randomness of where the conversation went. I hope this doesn't end here. I hope you corner them all and take them down further questions that are in your mind. But thank you again. It's CX Summit. This is exactly kind of conversation we want to have. Our introduction of client intelligence yesterday is a big deal from what we see. We hope that you feel that same. We're trying to walk that line of bringing automations to the next level, leaving supervision in place so that you can control. And as you look at those tools in our experience tier, we hope that you will sign up and try these out. Because again, everything that we're talking about here is a little bit about seeing what you can do, but staying in the confines of what's controllable. And we believe we are saving that time on the busy work, and we are freeing your staff up to have more meaningful one-on-one conversations between driver and rider. So thank you all.
Lawyers and legal consumers, you are our audience and our biggest strength. If you find Ethical-ish a good investment of your time, please spread the word. Until next time. Sponsored by Case Status, powered by LawPods.